And we have the great pleasure of having Arash Hajikhani with us today. He's going to present. He's all the way from Finland to present with us. So a long way from home, and we're very happy to have you. So you can present, and the people who are on LinkedIn Live, who are on the Zoom, can actually put their questions in the chat. And Martin Dozois, our webmaster, will just feed us the questions. So after your presentation, we can have a lively discussion on the use of LLM. So without further ado, Arash, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Catherine, for the invitation. So good morning, everyone. It's great to be in Montreal for the first time. I participated at the conference, the IOMAT, and I saw many of you there, and it's good to be in your institute and discuss a little bit more. I think I have more time here, like some 1 hour or so, but let's keep it interactive. Like whenever you see something you want to ask a question, just interrupt me and we can dive a bit deeper. My slides were 235 megabytes, so you can assume that I have a lot of material, but I will not gonna show all of it. It's more that, I get some feedbacks from you, and then I decide what kind of narrative I will basically continue with. So let me start talk a little bit about where I'm coming from. So I'm at VTT. We are a technical research institute. We are not university. I don't know exactly what is the equivalent of it in Canada, but we are very much within doing research projects. We're working with ministries, government. We do a lot of work with European Commission, which actually funds almost 150 billion euro of kind of money for doing research in many disciplines. VTT is relatively large, so we are almost 2,500 engineers, majority PhDs. In very many different disciplines. So we have from quantum computer to biotechnology to making food from solar. So it's very technical house. And within that, we are more or less like the social scientists within the bigger house. So it's roughly around 100 of us. I'm a team leader for one of the units there. I have a team of 10 people, mainly data scientists, AI engineers, econometrician, and where we are very much focusing on like the quantitative science technology study. So this is the front of the arrow. Yeah, I mean, you can imagine, like even within a unit of 100 people, you're always kind of debating that, okay, what is should be the most forefront? And I was good enough in negotiating that, we have to be in the front, because it's all about what you can improve is what you can measure. So then we are very much into the measurement business, indicator design, evaluation work, and then we have other areas like data economy, advanced data spaces, corporate foresight, which I also explained a little bit what it means when it comes to our context of work. And then yeah, so this is very much like, as I said, we work with also private sector. So we have projects for serving them on corporate foresight and kind of a strategic foresight type framework. So in a way, what we do for companies, if you're asking that, okay, what is beyond the research, we're serving them to help them understand what is their focus, what is their environment, and how they should align with all of the competition and all of the pressure that's coming towards them. And we have using a bunch of other methods, from PESCO studies, Delphi, all sort of radars to communicate the findings we are doing, in terms of whatever we find from the methods, then we are putting it into some form that they can also comprehend. And I can show you some case studies later on. So my team is quantitative foresight, just to show that, this is like a word cloud of the projects that we have done. In a way, you can understand that, we are doing econometrics, a lot of data science, metric design, innovation measurement, mapping, and eventually a lot of visualization, because obviously you do all this interesting, fancy work, but then if you cannot communicate, then it's not efficient enough. So we have been putting a lot of effort also to convey our studies, our insights into a visualized format. So this is myself. I'm having multiple roles. Beside VTT, I'm also an adjunct professor at university in Finland, Lappeenranta, where I'm professor of technology innovation management. I performed the various expert review roles within different countries. One of the latest one is the Swiss National Foundation. So I'm kind of helping them to evaluate the next generation of, let's say, research, which is focusing on science evaluation studies. I've been performing some visiting scholar positions, like recently I was in SPRU, unit of Science Technology Policy, University of Sussex, Brighton for 4 months. I have some editorial roles with journals, and then with EU, I'm also doing an expert. I'm in an expert panel of 80 people, where European Commission is asking from these experts about critical infrastructure and how they have to mobilize these resources for making EU more competitive in AI. So that's also partly what I do. I have a website for myself. I mean, I was never thinking of making a website. I mean, who goes to a website like that? But it's very much for AI, because I mean, I don't know how much you have worked with GPT or LLMs. Like, if you asked about yourself, there is a very likelihood that it just comes up with something that you're not approve of, you know. And then I was very bothered by that fact, because it's now very common that others are asking about you. Let's say some evaluator, they are evaluating your work, might be a reviewer who is reviewing your article. They eventually start asking about you, that, okay, who's this person? What is their expertise? And if AI doesn't know much about you, meaning that it's training data, it's not consist of your stuff, or then it's not accessing the very valid information that you are approve of, then it comes up with a bunch of stuff that you're probably, it penalizes your chances for whatever. So for that reason, I made this website, which is very much like it's like a red carpet to any AI crawler, that they can come and access my information, so that at least whenever somebody asks about me, why an AI, I get a good representation. Now it is a big discussion in our institute, because we realized, I mean, if you look at the data sets that these LLMs are trained off, you can actually access to some of them. For example, OpenAI, they have been using Common Crowd, which is the petabyte data on all the web in a way. And then we start to look into what do we have in terms of VTT, our institution, and we realize that eventually, despite the fact that we are a unit of like an institute of 2,500, for the AI we are an entity of 300 people. So AI didn't have access to all of us, meaning that people are not putting or updating their profile very frequently. I also encourage you to do the same for yourself, or for Montreal University or your unit, that what AI knows about you, your unit, and are you there? So, and if not, there are ways to enhance that, and that's something that we are doing it with our communication department, where they are running our websites and all of these profiles that we really want to show for the outside world. So yeah, I'll start today very much discussing about the paradigm of web AI, the new indicators that can come out from novel data sources, and novel ways of calculating that. This is the latest discussion paper we published with my European co-authors. They are also from, some of them from a company, some of them from universities and institutes, that they are very much working on data to make indicators for measuring innovation. Despite the fact that you can access it to read the full paper, I have some like summary slides. So what the premise is that we're talking about current challenges with the traditional indicators, and these are patent surveys, R&D stats that you're all probably familiar with. The biggest challenge are that these data sources are lagged. They are often biased towards very certain type of firms, normally big firms, and evidently we are not getting a lot of good insight about inter-organizational activity. So they are like very much like islands. With the web AI paradigm, the premise that we are proposing, that it should be taken more seriously, and then the fact that we are utilizing AI to analyze its organizational website, eventually we are able to pick up some additional value that can help us to map these innovation activities better. So innovation signals, it's all about what type of tech use they are having, what domain they are doing, their activity. It can be a little bit more sub-focused, like particularly, for example, on sustainability, on AI, on a strategy. And these are the things that normally companies put on out on their websites. Then the other caveat is that it's relatively more real-time insights, and the coverage is much more diverse across firm types. In COVID times, that eventually ended up to be a source to study companies because all the other data sources are lagged. And then it shows much better like kind of the interaction with other firms via the hyperlinks. So companies have this habit of mentioning their partners for many reasons in their website, and this is not equivalent if you look at it in other means of showcasing, like let's say scientific endeavor, such as patents or publications. So, of course, it's easy to say web AI, but when it comes to the practicalities, it's quite challenging because eventually you're coming from a very unstructured domain of a lot of information, a lot of data, all the way to like indicator. And this is needs a lot of choice, a lot of cleaning, a lot of decision making. So, and this is what the premise is, or what we are basically highlighting, that company websites are massive in terms of amount of information. One company might have almost 1,500 hyperlinks, so there's a lot of content, and then all the efforts of processing, from getting, let's say that unstructured data to structured, there's a lot of work. I mean, we have a more comprehensive pipeline there, but I just wanted to highlight that there's a huge amount of information loss, and this, if not validated, if you're not really making sure what is the thing that you're picking up, then you end up with all sort of other problems because you are getting far from your data. So a couple of cases that we have been also discussing in the paper is it has been used in terms of predictive capability of firm level of innovation. A lot of studies also been done recently now by using web AI for example, detecting sustainability engagement. Then obviously you end up noticing that there is also greenwashing and rainbow washing. That it's again the language that we're trying to pick up, and if it's been excessively been engineered, then you're not actually utilizing the indicator in the best way possible. Mapping innovation via hyperlinks. Also, some studies have been doing with web AI, and so it all opens up for reflection for future research, meaning that we know the limitations exist. So then, what type of future research can actually mitigate that? And there we are focusing more on large language models for comprehending the languages there. Also, ways in which we can structure this data in forms that it can be easier to retrieve. And here I have mentioning these graph knowledge graphs or graph MLs, which are more popular nowadays for extracting and preserving entities. I probably show some examples as well. But yeah, I mean, I've been talking a lot about these indicators. But the biggest threat is now when we have large language models used in many areas, including science, we see that there is a certain pollution happening. And this actually is quite alarming for indicator business, what we do as a community, because in a way, if you're not able to pick up the essence of language, then it is becoming a crisis. Generative AI is filling up the internet. There is no exact statistics on the volume and the kind of tenacity of the issue, but there are like reports, for example, search engines quality are suffering. I don't know if it's happened to you, but nowadays if you search for stuff, it is much more difficult to retrieve. And this is because now internet is filled with all generative AI content. Google has been trying to block, but the problem is that it's really difficult to identify if something has been generated by AI. They had a policy, even they flagged my website, so I was not indexed. And I had to deal with their support for maybe a month, trying to negotiate that, why you have picked me as a website which is generated by AI. And then they unfreezed me. So then they indexed me in the search engine. But then I realized that, they are also suffering as a indexer, that they cannot really identify that who is using AI to what extent. Now they are negotiating with OpenAI and other AI companies to somehow come up with a system that they can detect what is generated by AI. Because now the problem is that there's an abandon of content and search engine suffers for indexing. And the premise of search engine is that, it only makes sense if there is a limited amount of information that the ranking, all the background metrics can actually accumulate. So for example, let's say if Pietro is looking at something and they know that me and Pietro have a lot of similarity, then I actually get to know what Pietro was kind of searching in my higher rank. But then suddenly, if this content is so massive, the distribution is wide, then it's very difficult to compute. So yeah, I mean, we're talking a lot about the good things about GPT and generative AI. It's kind of democratizing science. I think most of the people in the room here are not native English speakers, so I think all of us, in a way, can feel that this language gap is something that can be, mitigated by using these tools. It actually offers more robust, more diverse, innovative type of scientific exploration and communication. But then the problem is that if people are using it irresponsibly, we end up having this crisis of like a lot of content in the web. Bad practices also have been happening. I think the reason why I say pollution, it's the fact that it's actually polluted. You can find papers that are actually indexed in journals where they are simply forgot to take out these blobs that you get from GPT that, suddenly they forgot to take. I'm sorry, but I don't have access to real-time information. And these are the things that, authors published. It has passed the review process. Some of them are retreated, I checked, but still some of them lives. So if you're doing a literature review and suddenly one of these papers go there, I'm not saying that, this is a bad scientific practice. I mean, of course, in this case, the instant that the author didn't even read what they have been publishing, it's alarming. But then, this is the tip of the iceberg. These are the ones who forgot to take it out. Imagine that, the ones who are taking it out and it's just out there. And then the question is that, okay, what is the responsibility, or what extent you can rely? I mean, did they really make a good care, or did they make a good rigor in their publication or not? This is all really hard to detect. I mean, just digging there a bit more, just go and type these things in Google Scholar. Like if you put, unfortunately, I'm unable to, which is like the very typical thing you get from GPT, there's like 1,830 paper or having that. Or, I'm very sorry, but there's like 751. This is something I searched a month ago. I hope that this is not increasing, but yeah. So yeah, indeed, our scientific discourse is polluted. And the ways to mitigate this is rather easy. I mean, next time you're writing something, you just ask GPT that don't put these when you are generating. So that doesn't help as well. Study done by my colleagues, Catherine also knows, Philip Shapira in Georgia Tech. They did a very simple study, like, suddenly by just analyzing the word frequency, they realized that just out of a sudden, in 2022, when the GPT became popularized, the use of delf as a word is just skyrocketing. And these are like the most overused ChatGPT words. So they did basically a very simplistic frequency mapping, and then they realized, all of these overused ChatGPT phrases. So the shift is alarming as well. Like, suddenly many authors are using it. And that also, in a way, I find this alarming. Yeah, I mean, now a paper just came out in Nature that they're talking about where it's coming, how is it coming, which journals, which disciplines. So I think it's rather interesting, maybe for you or any researcher, to just see when we talk about pollution, what is the purity of it within any discipline, any field. And the biggest problem and the challenge is that, you end up noticing that, okay, if authors are using AI to write papers, and then reviewers are actually using AI to review papers. That's also something that picked up in a conference. They realized that more than 20% of the reviewers are using AI for reviewing the papers. So at the end, you end up like AI is writing for AI to evaluate. So
being
then,
read by AI.
yeah, I mean, this is quite alarming. I don't know how we are getting this fixed, but this is not eventually getting any better. We had a discussion also in the conference. I asked the question from the editors that, what is the policies, what you guys are doing, or what is the publishers are actually aiming to, but there's not much to do. It's very difficult to identify. These tools are so good at, communicating. It's really difficult to identify them. Yeah. Yeah, just if there's anything, just
yeah. What I wanted to know is the question right now or afterwards or between.
Just feel free anytime.
Okay. Yeah. So because I was saying like you were saying that the pollution could be good, it could be bad. So okay, sorry. And so what I wanted to say is that the pollution is bad or is good. So there are like actually both sense. But the trade-off between bad and good is in how you implement it. So if like for me, it's not that bad that it's polluted in the sense that like that you are able to communicate better, but that you actually don't read. So in what's actually trying to communicate is maybe the worst. So right now you're detecting just the part of it's generative AI on the communication part, but you actually don't know the generative AI pollution in the analysis.
Yeah.
So there is another chapter that maybe we can go also and see, but it's even becoming harder. So in the sense like if you have challenges, because right now the LLM are also good in evaluating, so maybe they can help in the sense like you can use to evaluate a paper depending on the best practice of the paper. Depends how you use it. So there are, I think, also some work to do in the editorial side, because when you publish something in the first sentence, it's not always the fault of the person that's trying to publish, but maybe on the editorial side, this publishing this paper with this mistake in the first sentence is also like a problem.
Yeah. No, I mean the very simplistic problem is, let's say the review effort, which is the most human thing as it can get, like a human looking and basically making a decision. I mean, this is something that AI cannot do. You cannot make AI accountable. So the editor or whatever, they make a decision. And the problem is that suddenly if the volume of submissions are much higher, this is a real problem with journals. I'm also in the journal editorial board. Then you have the same amount of people, but suddenly the volume of submission is just 30% higher. This is the case for example, PFSC. We are getting like 1,000 publications in every 3 months. And this is 30% more than it used to be, 10,000 a year. So then what is going to be the case? Like, the quality of decision will degrade. And whenever you're also dealing with such a sophisticated machinery that makes the language so beautiful and so convincing, then I mean, just think about the human capability. Are you able to, as a reviewer, to like, look at and make decisions easier? I mean, I remember back in the days, it was rather easier because the tools for language editing and proofreading was not that sophisticated like GPT. So if you're reading an article and you realize that, okay, the arguments are flawed and the authors are not able to convey, then it's an easy choice. You say that, okay, this is a desk reject or this goes for a major revision because you're not able to really communicate what you're thinking. But now it's just difficult. I mean, you just drop it into GPT and say that, just make it academic sound. And then you end up like reading this like a novel with brilliant words and all. And then, this major like, and then always I have now a skeptical eye. Whenever I'm reading something, I'm like, is it written by AI? If why they're asking my time? Does it worth my time for a matter that is not written by a human? And then that kind of dilemmas are also with the reviewers as well. I mean, this is a bigger problem. I'm not gonna focus on the ways and mitigate. And for example, in TFSC, or other journals as well, what's the practice is that if the authors are fine using these tools, we simply ban them. So they are not able to submit anymore. They basically move to a blacklist, and that blacklist is visible for all the Elsevier publishing house. And I think this is good enough penalty to really commit authors that either they disclose, or if you're using then and not disclosing, then they are doing a very unethical bad practice, and the penalty is that the journal is not reviewing any of their work anymore. So, and these cases has happened recently. I mean, it's also difficult, if you can say that this has been written by AI, but then somebody can come like, no, I have written it myself. So there's a lot of back and forth. It's not so clear, but I mean, what to do? There's not much. So I've been talking about like, I wanted to also show you some examples, because we're talking about indicators, and I know your work is also focused. You're trying to use these in research, at least the work that I know from people here. But just discussing with Pietro in the office just before the seminar, and I thought that this is a good example. So we are using it to educate companies. This is the commercial aspect of how we are harnessing these methodologies and the science to cater it to the companies. And this is the technology radar, which is powered by LLM. The methodology, I mean, this figure is really, I'm sure it's very small for you, maybe sophisticated, but I try to walk through it and open it up, what's happening here. So, of course, the premise is that we get companies' interest because they want to know where they are in the bigger map of whatever activities are happening. So let's say if you're an R&D company, you are deciding about your future, let's say 5-10 years activity in the field, you would like to get some feedback that what other companies are doing, what the sector is doing, what the field is actually going. And this is where we come in. So first of all, we at VTT, we have collected a good amount of subscriptions. So we are roughly paying €500,000 a year for many of these quality data subscriptions, including, Escopus, Clarivate, all of these business intelligence type of data. So then that's actually the start of our exercise. So data source identification, we do a lot of data retrieval, cleaning, all the work on keyword extraction, semantics of the language, all the way to get to some space that we can, summarize and get to like topics. Then working a lot with time segments, because normally what we want to convey to the company clients is that, what is the trend? So if you are working on, let's say, quantum computer algorithms, how this area or how these debates have been evolving over time. So these time segmentation is also important in terms of science technology. Normally we have, timestamp data. So then, we can basically start to calculate certain diffusion metrics. For example, the signal strength, degree of diffusion, or degree of intensity. And with all of that, we are able to map what is emerging, what is getting attention, what is getting more intensity. And yeah, here it comes with the large language model. So of course, we as humans, we are not able to read these content, and that's why we are onboarding LLMs to extract metadata, get the topics out. And then we were rather successful to integrate humans also in the process. So we have also the expert panels. It's oftentimes within people could be from the company or people within VTT, they're experts and they are looking at these things that have been identified by, let's say, LLMs in order to re-rank them. And that's at the end what we are communicating with the let's say the company case is visualization. They love visualization. They don't like these methodology stuff. They want to see clearly that, okay, what is happening, what is important, where they should put their focus. And you can imagine that all of that exercise is to do so that we can arrive into a very simplistic and easy to communicate domain, such as like a radar, that they can, navigate. And so we also put efforts to, do visualization in a proper way, because that's how we can communicate that. Yeah, so this is the methodology in a very simplistic view. You can imagine that you're getting all of these metadata, data collection happening, data cleaning happening. You use LLMs, advanced text analytics, and all of that to arrive from that space of whatever, like let's say a structured list of topics, and then just populating these topics into a map that they can start to navigate, they can start to discuss and get some sort of an insight. This is, for example, the end product that we sell to companies. They buy this, and then within each areas we have all this additional information. So let's say if we have generated a radar for them, and the quadrants are, let's say, technology area, and these spheres are all the way from mature to trial, development, and new, like emerging. So we have mapped them, and then they are able to go and navigate these, understand that, okay, what, for example, generative AI means in their field, and all of that. So this is something they like, and we are rather successful selling. And this is, for example, the
Question, Arash?
yeah, sure, Catherine, please.
When they use your tool, can they actually click? Oh. Sorry, it doesn't seem. Okay. Okay. So when the companies use can they click on that and then get more information
Yeah,
by
that's
clicking on the number?
That's
Okay.
a demo now. As you
Oh,
can
right,
see, this
okay.
is like living on a database, and this is on a web app, so they can click, they can go, and they can read. They can navigate, they can search. So this is how we are. Previously we were offering them an Excel, and they hated it. So then the question is like, how to do it. If you want to put this on a slide, it suddenly becomes like a slide of 150 pages, because there's a lot of areas you can go. But then interactive things are nice. They can click, they can read. There's a bunch of stuff they can do. We got a good feedback also. Yeah.
So, are you actually developing a web platform? It's open. Or is it done through Tableau? Is it like Microsoft BI, and you give them an access, or you have the resources internally, to develop front end and custom applications?
Honestly, this is something I did it myself. So there's of course, a bit of front end development and back end, but then at the end, you can get to quite good products. This is React based. And I also use some open source repository that have been developed by other scholars in the domain. So I just modified that, customized it, and this is running on a Azure web app. So the URL is not fancy because it's 52 or 12. So this is like an actual server running in Finland. So then I give them access. They can access via username and password, and in a way it's protected. It's for them, but easier for me to communicate. So then I just decided, okay, I'll do it, because I can give this for more companies and so on and so forth. But yeah, so this is one of the products that just wanted to showcase. Yeah, and then it generates the PDF as well. They can click, and if they want to read. One actual use case I noticed that they generate a PDF and then drop the PDF into GPT and ask questions from it. So this is now very popular. Everybody's doing it, similar to these companies as well. Yes, Pietro, please.
I have another question, because this work I think you did a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Would you redo it in the same way today?
Well, actually, things have changed in terms of the method. For example, back in the days, we were using a lot of RAG, retrieval augmented generation, because there was limitations with the large language models in terms of the context window. You had to chunk the data and then do other sort of indexing and retrieval. Nowadays, LLMs are having much broader context windows, so in a way, you don't need them to do so. Back then, we were also very cost conscious because, I mean, imagine if you were doing it with the prices back in the days, and this is like 2 years ago, you could have ended up like with a couple of €100. So we were trying to really limit the amount of text you're giving it. But nowadays, the prices are very discounted. I mean, whatever we used to do, let's say 2 years ago, you can do the same almost with 1/50th of the price. So it's cheaper, meaning that we can actually expand the horizon. We look at other data. Then the whole retrieval system is also different because now the larger context window is solving some of the problems. But then with the visualizations, I'm happy. I mean, maybe you might have an opinion how I'll do. Yeah.
I was thinking more in all the process that you did before, data cleaning and all the stuff, how much simple today will be and how much different it will be.
Yeah, I mean, with that, you can always just expand, because whenever it comes to these kind of exercises, you have to draw a boundary around the data that you want to analyze. So the more you keep the boundary wider, you have more data, and then there's more cost, there's more effort. I think that line can be a bit more broader because we can afford. But back in the days, we had to really select. So that may be one change that happens now. So I have some material on how actually large language models work. I think you guys probably know well. I probably just skip it. But just for the fact that, you know, maybe quick highlights. I mean, what we are trying also to do is to involve as many as different language models into the process as well, for many reasons. First of all, we are getting to the point that the dependency to, let's say, American-based solutions are becoming a problem. You know, nowadays there's a discussion in Europe that it'd be better to go and look for alternatives, because if tomorrow, let's say, for whatever reason, would it be tariff or OpenAI is not compliant with European law, then suddenly it's blocked off, and then we have all these systems built on, let's say, OpenAI, then we're going to be screwed. So for that reason, we are also trying to see what else is out there to mitigate and, you know, replace. The other aspect is that, you know, I think in the conference we also had the discussion in the session about the validation. So the whole discussion about evals. So because you're onboarding some LLM, it's doing something, but then again, at the same time, as humans, we don't have the capacity to really evaluate what's just came out. So we are using this paradigm. It's called LLM as judge, meaning that you are outsourcing the same task to as many as LLM. And because the LLMs are also trained in different ways, we train different training data, theoretically, you're basically averaging out the errors, because if all of the LLMs are with the agreement that, okay, this case, then you can actually give the green light. But then if you suddenly see that there is disagreement, then you can actually zoom in that effort and look at the case. So this is now why we are trying to onboard as many as LLMs. And when I talk about the whole market of LLMs, it's now roughly about 15,000 LLMs outside. OpenAI has only 10, or like Gemini has 5, Google. So imagine that this is a very vast amount of, with all different cost structures and all of that. So yeah, I mean, this probably you're well familiar with the whole GPT and the generative pre-trained transformer. But one thing I also highlight, because you know, some doesn't really go that deep. They published a paper, and this is the only paper that they really disclosed about the technicals, how they really compile the GPT 3.5 and 4. Since then, they were, I mean, OpenAI used to also come to conferences. I used to go to these EMNLP, empirical methods for natural language processing. They used to come there, but then suddenly these people disappeared because they ended up into so many legal issues They disclose the stuff here, for example, what training data they use, how they did it. And then that's why they're really kind of considered as a proprietary and they're not sharing. So we don't have much to know how they are doing it, but there is still, I mean, this paper is very critical. I mean, attention is all you need. I suggest you, like, if you haven't looked at it, maybe just go and just drop it to some LLM and ask questions about it. But there you can actually see how these models are compiled. There is a very nice graph and a diagram that they're showing that what are these all the steps, what is the training data that they're using. For example, the common crowd, as I said, books 1, books 2, these are open source. They have, of course, used proprietary data, but they didn't really disclose it in the paper. But I think this part is very interesting, that, you know, how from the very, let's say, simplistic BERT application, they went all the way to kind of labeling it and implementing the proxies and policies for showing the type of answers that the users will see. I think this is very interesting because then you suddenly realize that, okay, we talk a lot about AI, but then in the back end, there's a lot of labelers. There are humans that are doing these RHLF, this human reinforcement by feedback. That basically, I don't know if you have used any BERT models. I think all of us have used it in Google search. When you type something, your query gets completed. So that's a very basic BERT transformer-based utility that you can get. And it was already there in Google search for back in the years. So this is the same premise that the laborers did. So when they trained the GPT, maybe I kind of go a little bit to the history. So I mean, I did my PhD in natural language processing, so I'm kind of following this trend. The science and the theory suggested that, you know, if you apply the transformer methodology on a large amount of data, you can actually achieve a very good coherent, like a chatbot or a kind of interface for language. And this was already practiced. I mean, if you have ever used GPT-2 when it came back in the days, it used by some airline for demoing. And you could see that, okay, there are some premise. There is like a good way of interacting with it. And then it actually give the grounds to, okay, let's scale this. And OpenAI was recruiting and they got a lot of resources. But then suddenly it kind of overlapped with the era where blockchain was also very popular. And suddenly GPU costs become so expensive that many of these GPU providers like Microsoft and others didn't really see the benefit of giving those resources access to the OpenAI fellows. So then cryptocurrency was booming for some time. And the moment that the cryptocurrency crashed, you know, the market crashed, GPT became cheap. And then OpenAI was able to afford to run it on a bigger scale. So this time they onboard a lot of data, and then they trained the GPT-4. And then this is like the BERT model. They used a lot of laborers, meaning that the laborer is typing something, and then the LLM is completing, basically the transformer is completing the sentence. And then they ended up doing a lot of ranking. That, okay, for example, does it have harmful content? Does it have sexual content? All of these attributes labelers were giving in a way kind of, I mean, if I go back to this figure, after like experimentation, for example, here the prompt is to explain the moon landing to a 6-year-old, and then the transformer is just completing that chapter, and then the laborer is ranking them, and this all the way goes into these PPO, so proximal policy optimizations. Basically, you are penalizing the LLM by the quality of the responses that you want to get. So, I mean, one of the not a very nice examples is that, you know, you're putting a baby on an electric chair, and whenever they are positive and giving a good answer, they get a reward. If not, they get a penalty. So that way they are learning. These LLMs are getting better and better. And this is the interface of the labeler. And then in another interface, they are ranking the qualities, the responses. So at the end of the day, you know, with all of this, they are able to get to the point where they had the GPT-4. And, you know, we talk a lot about that, okay, this is AI, but in reality, these are all the labelers quality of what they want to get out of an LLM, and this is what we see at the end result. Yes, please.
Are we aware, like, how do they do that in terms of like process, like the types of person that are invited to do this kind of fine tuning? Like even like me generally, when I have like I do a request and then I have like these type of outputs, and then they ask you, right, like the user, like what do you prefer, and it's pretty subtle, the differences. Sometimes it's just like, well, it's two different flavors, like today maybe I'm in the mood for pistachio and tomorrow will be for like chocolate. Like it's not a really objective better answer between both. Like I don't know if you have some insights on that.
I mean, these A/B testings are very popular. They also do it. I have also received a lot of that. Some of them is for gauging. They just want to know that do you really pay attention. I mean, they collect a lot of input data, like whatever, even though you're scrolling in the GPT is an input. But are you happy with the content? Are you reading it or not? Let alone thumbs up, thumbs down. So this is how they are getting better at identifying what is actually the thing that humans want to hear or are acceptable for them. With these labelers, it just came out in the court because they didn't really disclose how many labelers they used, and then later on when they had the court case, it just came out that they have been using thousands of labelers. They have been training them, and then you only get to evaluate the quality of these labelers if you do some post evaluation. For example, they realize that okay, these labelers have a very liberal majority from South Africa. Also, the kind of the essence of language was also coming from their way of talking English. So yeah, because the companies don't really disclose, they don't want to really showcase their proprietary stuff. But yeah, I mean, these use cases and the users are very important. That's why we see the cost of these models are very discounted. I mean, technically, OpenAI is a loss-making company. They're not making profit. Last year, they made 4 billion revenue, but their costs were 5 billion. So they are 1 billion loss company. But if you look at the evaluation, it's just crazy. I mean, I think they're now more than 100 billion evaluation. One of the, how many? 150? 350. Wow. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I mean, they have been discussing with Sequoia and all. So yeah, I mean, this is very costly for them. If you look at the other competitors, they're also giving a lot for free. And it's mainly because they want to get users, they want to get your feedback, they want to test, they want to just see that, how they can improve. But yeah, I mean, don't let me start on the direction that this is going, but it's not going. I mean, I had some slides, I didn't put it here, but I mean, if you think that, okay, Google is in the business, they are mainly ad-driven business. Meta is there. Meta is 98% ad-driven business. We're putting a lot of money on AI. And then when you kind of connect the dots, you realize that, and even OpenAI, I mean, the valuation is crazy. You're thinking, okay, how they're going to make this money? From subscription, from developers, not much. I mean, if you do the math, it doesn't make the buck. But the reality is that all of these LLMs are going to the ad business. So OpenAI has been recruiting from Google, these people from advertisement. Google is very good at advertisement anyways. And now what you see the signals is that suddenly they are combining the advertisement business with the LLMs, which there becomes very scary because suddenly you will end up interacting with an entity that's so convincing. And when you're chatting with it, it's trying to convince you to buy an air fryer, go to a yoga class, I don't know. So then I think that's gonna be the scary part because, okay, we are exposed with ads. We know that, okay, for example, in Europe, Google is by law supposed to identify which links are basically ad sponsored. So if you do a search I don't know how it's in Canada, but in Europe, if you do a search, you see that, okay, these links are ad sponsored. So as a user, you can decide, okay, these are ad sponsored, maybe I don't want to look at them. But I mean, think about like if it comes to an LLM, which is like so communicative and people are using it as a companionship, it becomes just so scary. And one of the things is that I also realized when the deep search came, I don't know how many of you used deep search function in the LLMs. It basically performs like a very heavy exercise of reading and all. I noticed that when I'm asking a query, it's giving a lot of references from MDPI, which is not considered as the most, kosher publisher. And then you realize that, okay, MDPI had an agreement with OpenAI, meaning that, they are having let's say, a more fast access to the MDPI stuff. So when you asking some, like, performing a deep search on whatever topic, your references is coming from that publisher. So then the question is that, okay, do you approve that reference? Is it like something that you're approver? And then it's just coming into, but then in the back end, there's a lot of now discussions of who's paying more to grab the user attention, to get to the user's view. So, I mean, this gets combined with ads sooner or later, and it's going to be very challenging. It's going to be a dark times, I would say. Sorry, you had a hand raised.
I just vous m'entendez? Oui, non, je suis super. All right. Sorry. You were just mentioning. So you think maybe it's a little bit off topic though, but the fact that Meta just acquired Scale AI, which has probably the largest verified data, like data set in the planet. How do you see, for example, do you see that for such applications that you are describing, the reliability and the need for such classified data will be still needed in, say for the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, I mean, that case is rather interesting because, I mean, nowadays when they do any sort of merges or acquisition, there are other reasons. One of the main reasons is that, suddenly data has a value. I mean, a data which was somewhere in a website of a company, now they have harnessed it, and on a scale, suddenly it's showing some value. So having any company that possesses certain data, and they are also labeling it and meaning that they're generating data that it's the ownership of that company, it's eventually very, very valuable. That's the same reason why, Google has a very high chance to come up with much better products, and they're actually getting more user bases because of all the costing strategy and the access they have to the bigger data sets, because Google has been scraping the whole web for many years. So they have ownership on archival web, where, for example, OpenAI and others have to go and make agreement. They have to buy. So for them, it's much more costlier than what Google has access to. So I think all of that leads to the point that we will get, let's say, more limited LLMs, because suddenly the data is more expensive. They cannot afford, they cannot index, they cannot show. And then it will become a kind of a data access war. Who has access to this? Who has better deal to that? So it's very common that nowadays, for example, you even have multiple LLMs because they have only access to certain LLM. For example, the New York Times, they didn't settle with OpenAI, they settled with another LLM provider. So let's say if you're willing to read New York Times stuff with an LLM, then you have to go and subscribe to the LLM because it has only access to that LLM. So yeah, I mean, we also wrote a paper about this trend, which I will hopefully get to it. But yeah, I have half an hour and try to go a little bit faster. Yeah, I think this picture, I like to stay for a bit because we're talking a lot about, the training data will limit the utility of an LLM, because if it's been trained on a certain data, it will also inherit. And then the problem is that, okay, if you're not designing any sort of a strategy to mitigate the training data, you get all the biases. And this is the very interesting case. Like if you just even now type ChatGPT, like give me a clock that shows 5:15 time or whatever, it just gives you a clock that always showing this 2:10 or 10:2. And no matter how much you try, it just keeps you giving that. This becomes a little bit viral on the internet, and I picked it up because I think that conveys the message very well. And the reason is that if you just go and look up for the clock pictures, for some aesthetic reasons, some designer decided, okay, clocks better to look like that. And then imagine that if the training data for an AI like that is all the clocks pictures with these kind of aesthetics, then doesn't matter whatever you ask, it just gives you that plot which shows that. And this is the same case with many different fields. Let's say if you are in a very niche field and the LLM that you're using doesn't expose or doesn't have access to that data or the training data that you're approve of, then you are not expecting to get something quality. One example I also give in these cases that in US there is a community. It's called flat earthers. They believe Earth is flat, and yeah, my examples are all from US. And they have made an LLM with all the information that supports that indeed Earth is flat. So if you talk with that LLM, it just gives you all these references and evidence and reasons and arguments that, okay, Earth is indeed flat. So this is again the question that, okay, what the data is, what the use case, and all of that. So
you're gonna give credit to them; they're proactive.
Yeah, they are active. Yeah, I mean, this is the constitutional AI discussion that now we are going to the direction that you would need to check what is the premise of that LLM, what is the design of it, what is the training data in order to even onboard to your application, because then you're inheriting all of the biases if there are. Yeah, this was the case that I said, I asked for the deep search and then it gave me references that MDPI is suddenly too frequent there. Yeah, but then the thing is that, with LLMs, the biggest achievement is that they are very good at understanding the language. They are so designed in a way that, processing language for them is rather straightforward. And in language, we have certain nuances, even as humans. We understand that, okay, this is a location, this is a place, this is a person's name, this is object, this is object. And that attribute is very valuable, but then you need to also always be aware that, okay, if you are relying on the judgment of an AI, it has a training data where you will inherit all the biases. And that's why these, let's say, methodologies, for example, RAG, retrieval augmented generations, are there to help us to define the knowledge base. So this is majority of the applications that we do. So instead of like relying on the training data of a language model, we try to limit it only to the capability of understanding the language, but then we are offering the data that we approve of. You're just doing an exercise, okay, this is the data I want to, let's say, build my foresight radar, or kind of get my intuition about topics in this field of X, Y, Z. And then, you can actually put attribute of it because you are putting a boundary around your data. You're approving that, okay, this is my data, I want to just query, I want to structure it, do whatever purpose I want to do with it. Yeah, I mean, some notes about this. This is the paper I also mentioned that we published and discussed about the fact that language models need to be visited critically, because one thing is majority of these companies are for profit. They are just trying to convince you that you should use this best of the best and pay the top price because it's just what they're saying. But in reality, many of the things can be achieved with smaller language models or even simplistic machine learning models. And I think that's something that will eventually become more and more of a discussion for many reasons. For cost, I mean, you don't necessarily need to pay top price for something simplistic. For privacy reasons, I mean, the fact that, OpenAI, you cannot even run it on a secure server. It's just the moment that you send the data, it's just gone. It's not your data anymore. They can come and say that, we are dealing your data sensitive and blah, blah, but how you want to kind of approve that? Yes?
But isn't that the case already, say, with various, particularly business models, such as Cohere, Mistral, and some other ones, say as Llama, where it's like, the tendency is already, it's Llama, they have a few models already, and even a couple of Chinese ones that are, DeepSeek, yes, and the other one. Yes. So it's kind of like you said, I think it's too costly, and the difference is almost, sort of perceptive for most people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, well, of course, using OpenAI is easy because you just can access an API. For those open source, you need to do a little bit of kind of coding and establishing an environment service and all. But these are important questions to ask, and especially when we have these customer projects, we have to do as our funders are saying. So if they have sensitive data, then we need to go and find alternative options. But then in this case, in the paper, if you end up reading it, we actually realize that in some cases you get actually much better quality out of smaller models because you can actually modify them. You can understand what is happening within them. I mean, diagnosis is another problem. With bigger large language models, it's like a black box. You cannot really understand what is their decision-making process. So then consistency becomes a problem, kind of reproducibility becomes a problem. So you don't get the same answer if you try it, tomorrow. But then if you design a machine learning model as historically we used to do, just a simple classification model with a good amount of training data and all, then you are sure that you get some consistency out. And this is the debate we are putting out in the paper, that don't just fall into the easy path because there's the cost. It's good to educate ourselves. It's good to get out of the comfort zone. Comfort zone being just using on the shelf OpenAI APIs. So you're actually getting maybe quality stuff, but you're also losing so many things. And this is the kind of the alarm or a flag to be aware. There's other ways to do it, but it's a good practice to also get comfortable with these paths to break the dependency and all of that narrative. Yeah, I think this I've talked. I can maybe try to go a bit further. I mean, maybe I just mentioned it. I mean, now we are seeing a lot of automated ways of writing a paper. I mean, these pipelines, you can find it a lot nowadays in internet, that you just make a query, it goes and finds the paper, it will make the references, it will write you the literature review and all of that. But then again, the problem is always that with the fact that, let's say, I think probably you have seen these chatbots that you're able to discuss with papers. They're relatively easy to use, kind of comforting, but again, there is a caveat, because when I actually digged into some of them, I realized that they're not comprehensive at all. For example, in the site case, and this is the one that actually gladly mentions what is their data that they are building their applications on top. In the whole world, we have roughly around 400 to 500 million publications, and that means all the Chinese Academy or Russia and all of that. So from that, they only have 186 million publications. That's the covered. And then from that, they only have 34 million full text covers. So just think about 400 million all the way to the 34 million. What a fraction of coverage they are having. So evidently, if you end up chatting with these tools for doing a comprehensive literature review, it gives you something, but it's not comprehensive at all, because the amount of data that they have access, and this is, by the way, open source papers, because they cannot actually access other papers because it's not their possession. It's a data owned by publishers. In a way, it's a breach of contract if they really scrape it or do anything on that. So this is rather important to realize, that whenever you're dealing with these tools, you are getting far away from the actual debate because they are only fractionally covering. Yes, please.
I have a question. Do we know actually what's the coverage of Google Scholar?
Sorry, would you repeat again?
What is the coverage of Google Scholar, for instance? Like, what would be like is there also a section bias there? Like,
certainly, because I mean, Google Scholar is just having a like a very vast coverage, but then the quality of it is a question. And then, of course, they are not having access to the full text; they're just indexing them. So in a way, it is nowhere. I mean, for example, the closest thing you can say OpenAlex by certain conventions in OpenAlex most of the titles and abstracts are publicly available to use. But then again, let's say if you are doing a comprehensive literature review, you're actually digging only in the titles and abstracts. It's nowhere going to the full text paper because it's not there.
And there's also like an issue of access, right? Like all these platforms will need to pay for this.
Yeah, it's a licensing issue. I mean, meaning that, let's say, if you want to cover papers that it's owned by Elsevier, Elsevier will not make an agreement with you because they are rebuilding their tool. Elsevier Scopus AI is now trying to mimic the same quality of whatever you get from site, but on all the Elsevier content that they have access to. And then, you can just count how many publishers we have. Elsevier, Wiley, Elva Edgar, Oxford, Sage. So it's like nowhere comprehensive. Can I proceed or?
Yeah.
I mean, this is also another example. Like I were able to go and dig deeper to disciplines, and there you can see that there is also variation within disciplines. So, and this is different because each discipline has different practices for dissemination. For obvious reasons, like computer science is very broad because they also have this tendency to publish open source, archive-X. But then for other areas, disciplines, you have much less content. So that's also something that one needs to do.
When we are running the Q&A session, there is one question from the
Sure. Yeah.
terminate.
I can maybe wrap up in 5 minutes and then we have 10 minutes. Yeah. Okay, perfect. I have a lot of the slides and then I have 5 minutes, so I need to really choose where should I go. I mean, knowledge graphs, I think we discussed a lot. Let me just see where can I end up where it's kind of sensible. Yeah, I think maybe I discussed about this case with the OECD. I mean, we are now talking a lot about indicators, and we work with the OECD on a project because of the fact that they also wanted to give a structure to the policy documents that they're collecting from their member states. So, for your information, OECD has done this very extensive practice over maybe 2 decades by collecting all the policy documents from all the member states. For example, you can go and see what is the policies in Canada on gender diversity in educational institutions. So there is actually that material there. So they have been doing it in multiple ways. So they have been basically targeting delegates in each country, collect these documents, and then trying to get metadata out of them via the survey. So these surveys normally are very long. It takes, for example, a week that a person or a delegation can go to the survey and answer all the aspects to cover the survey based on the policy that they have initiated in their respective countries. So then suddenly you can imagine that this is a very beautiful case for LLM because you have a document being a policy document of 400 page, and then you have a very structured survey. So then what we did was we were trying to map this, meaning that, okay, if the human role or the delegation is to look at the document, answer the survey based on the document, we can actually do this with LLM, meaning that we query. And then we actually ended up doing this, and it became very successful. So I can show you some instances here. So this is, for example, an example of policy initiative. This is a website in Germany for one of the ministries where it's actually talking about a certain policy initiative, target groups, different types of metadata is coming out of that. And this historically has been done by humans. So in a way, we have a very good quality label data. Historically, humans have done that. So in a way, if you are onboarding LLM, we can utilize that historical data to extrapolate the exercise. So that's exactly what we did. So we went and scrape the websites of these policy documents. We had the links because the delegates have identified them. All the web scraping part probably straightforward. And then we started to build this LLM pipeline. That, okay, we have now questions from the surveys, and now we want to ask questions from an LLM, embedding certain, validation strategies. Because, as I said, we want to make sure that everything is rigor. So we have this LLM as judge, partly for evaluation purposes. And for example, this is the structure of the prompts that we were utilizing to get this information from the text. This is, for example, I just put a data frame to just show you that, okay, we have this, let's say, a web page of a policy document. We are identifying the instrument. We are getting this structured data, and then we are also having the human evaluator. So basically, survey data means that what the human basically said historically for that matter, so we can then compare. And then when we did this this is the evaluation method. We applied the triad framework. I don't go through it, but basically the premise is we are iterating the task over and over again with different LLMs to make sure that there's no hallucinations involved. But yeah, this is maybe some statistics. Of course, when we looked at the quality of content we got from each country, it's not very universal. So some countries we have more coverage, some less. Some websites are out of use, so always this missing data is an issue. But then this is the interesting part. So when we compare the survey answers by LLM, looking at the document, and the answers that the human gave, we have a very high overlap. In this case, in policy instruments, 80% plus, in some cases 88%, meaning that human said something, and LLM also said it as well. For policy target groups, it's even much more higher. Policy teams, again, 80 plus more. So this is something that now OECD has integrated. So now if you go to, as a delegate, if you go to fill out the survey, basically, let's say you have a new SDI policy updated in Canada. As a delegate, you go there and then you see two interfaces. One is that, okay, you can just do it traditionally as a human as you do, or then you do it with the beta, which is LLM kind of integrated. Meaning that if you click on that, then LLM actually pre-fills the survey for you. So as a delegate, you look and see that, okay, this is now pre-filled, do I approve of? There's a thumbs up, thumbs down, or you can edit. Now we're collecting this data to study what are the areas where suddenly we're seeing humans are having a different opinion, or are they approving of or disapproving of. So this is now rolling as I'm talking. Maybe on that note, there were other use cases that we basically use the same pipelines for sustainability assessment or other stuff, but yeah, please.
Were there cases where the LLM divergent was actually creative and useful, or it was just rubbish?
Yeah, we saw cases where LLMs were picking up more, and then the question is that, okay, is the LLM correct or human didn't notice it? Now we are collecting data to really make an answer. My own judgment is if you utilize these pipelines, actually LLMs are quite efficient. So I would put more weight on the LLM quality than the human, because then the humans, practically the fact is that they are having this 100-page document and they have to fish information out. So the chances of missing information is relatively high. So for that reason, I put value on the LLM. But then we really want to get it from actual data, which we are now collecting. So yeah, we're planning to write a paper on it. But in a way, it's a little bit of a tricky situation, because I have been in stakeholder groups where these delegates are there. And you also feel like some sort of insecurity, because some of these delegates are just hired to do this task. You go to, I don't know, Brazil or some Asian countries, and then suddenly you realize that some of them are very critical, because they really see that, okay, this is eventually something that it's going to replace their work, their job. For some of the delegates, it's less. They're really happy with it because it was some extra work on top of whatever they are doing. So then we suddenly saw that, okay, they are so excited about it because it's saving them time. But then imagine if you're a delegate, if you're a person responsible filling that out, and then there's an AI doing it for you, then they were more critical. But yeah, I mean, this is the kind of, I think, the classical paradigm we're now seeing. Maybe in many different other disciplines or works, but similarly, policy making. Maybe I just finish on that note, and we can just go to the Q&A. So, I mean, I have some material, but I'm not going through it. I just wanted to land on the last slide. I will anyways leave the slides here. So yeah. So, but yeah, I think that's. Thank you.
Well, I have one question from Abu Bakri, but just let me
Bring the question online first.
get the question I have online that came from Professor Nazer Edzati Kiban. He worked on a bias of LLM. So essentially the question is, what's your thought on bias in LLM and how you assess this issue?
Well, yeah, I mean, I highlighted the areas where the bias can penetrate. I gave examples. I think one of the discussions now that even we are discussing on a European level is designing systems where we can diagnose when LLMs or AI is involved, because simply you can end up making systems so abstract, and then over time, it just gets more abstract and abstract. And then the problem is that what is the role of the human in the loop? Is it designed with the AI and human centricity? And this is more of a development exercise, that you design systems that it's, let's say, straightforward enough so the human can understand, and they can diagnose, they can enter, they can monitor, they can affect. So I think this is very much like a design principle, and yet we don't have very structured frameworks. I think everything is so new, but that's going to be definitely emerging, that whenever there is a system involved with AI, you can actually open the hood and see what is really happening there. Otherwise, it just gets so complicated that even though it might actually making a better decision for the humanhood, but if you are not able to understand, that's a problem, because you cannot make AI accountable. Accountability is an issue with why the human needs to understand. You cannot go and say that, okay, well, this decision is made to revoke social welfare for this person because AI said it. This is not going to fly in the court. So then again, it's a question that the human needs to understand. Well, not yet. I mean, that's a good thing, because in some area, in some jurisdiction, now AI is getting weight. But so far, as long as it cannot be explained by a human, accountability is issue, and for that reason, this needs to be designed in a trustworthy, responsible way.
So I have one from Abu Bakri, then from the web, Catherine, and then we'll continue. Abu Bakri, click on. It's okay.
I have a question. I guess from this web AI paradigm excludes some innovation like social or physical innovation, which particularly present in developing countries. And my question is how these data be concretely merged with pattern data or quantitative data, particularly in developing countries.
Yeah, I mean, well, again, the challenge is that, okay, when we say web AI, meaning that we are basing the input data something that's visible in the web. So let's say if it's on a website, if it's available on the open web, then that's basically something that we can start to build upon that, meaning that we can generate other metadata. In certain cases, and we also noticed that, you don't have the web data, so that premise is not there, meaning that either that source is not relevant, or your query is not relevant. But if the basis is not there, I think the web data suddenly become irrelevant. In our exercises, cases that I have been showing, we are looking at, for example, high-tech firms. For example, let's say the thesis of my master thesis student, she focused on AI activities in firms within Finland. So this is something that, companies are relatively high-tech. They are looking for investors. They are looking to signal it to stakeholders. So they really put it out in their website. So in a way, web AI or web material is a good source to start the exercise. But in some cases, if you think that, okay, this discussion is not coming into the web, or maybe it's coming to the social media, then this needs to be changed into those kind of data sources. But the essence of the method in terms of, picking up, getting the topics, validating, I think those stay universal. It's the source that changes.
So yeah, one from Lucas Nazarko from Poland. Do we can find the blacklist that journal made about the authors that was banned for not disclosing the use of AI in their writing?
I know in journals there is, but it's not public, and it cannot be public because it's when you submit a paper, you're agreeing on a non-disclosure with the journal. So it's for the same reason that reviewers are not allowed to use the content of the author, drop it into like an OpenAI or any tool, because you are breaching that agreement. You're not allowed to share it or put it anywhere else because you are in agreement with the author. So for that reason, I mean, this is not the case. It's more like, within the journal, then there is a flag that it's within that eventually author.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Catherine?
There was another question from Leila's husband somewhere online. Was not from public.
From Nasser.
Yeah.
It's that I made, yeah.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure that. Okay. Quick comment. You mentioned how to break this cycle of the publish or perish, and people using AI to actually write the papers to do faster. There's a tendency towards the narrative CV that focuses on 3-4 of your best publications, hence breaking the cycle of sausage factory papers that the more is the better. So if as academics, there's a movement towards these narrative CV and telling a story of what it means, what all this research means, and less focus on quantity and less obsession with H-index and other indicators, but more focus on how our research is transformative for the earth, for the human race, for applications, then maybe we stand a chance to break this cycle in which we are stuck. So there's a movement towards that, to free ourselves and put Dora really in application. And the other one, the other question I had was, when you were comparing the whether the human is approving what the LLM is doing, the OECD, do they get a feel that the human is becoming lazy because the job has been done, and therefore they look, yeah, it's okay. So the time they take to verify that each question has been well answered, do they really verify that it's been well answered? When it matches the LLM, is this because it's true, or is it because of laziness?
Well,
I think as humans, we have a tendency to become lazy. I mean,
Yeah.
we have so little time. If it's all written by the LLM, I will say, yeah, it's okay.
yeah.
I will not take the time because our attention is limited.
Indeed. I
So-
mean, a very good point, Catherine. I mean, honestly, we don't have the data to really see. I think the data is definitely somewhere, but we haven't really started to dig there. The assumption is that, this is like a very important process of reporting a certain data. So, even the delegations, they know that, okay, this needs to be very kind of clear, and this needs to be without any error. So in that case, it's not like just some survey that you just want to fill out. It's the most important survey. You're representing the country in the whole sample of other countries. So if something is not right in there, then it kind of pops out somewhere else, which might create collateral reputationally. But yeah, I mean, that tendency indeed exists. And as I showed you the percentages, the chances of just letting an LLM just doing it, and it's all good, it's very high. So then it's more about like reviewing and making sure that, you know, it is reflected. But I think it's only a matter of time we will see if it's going to be next, and submit, or there is like time and people edit, or because now all the functionality is there. As a human, you can just say, no, delete it, and then write your own, or edit, or give thumbs up, thumbs down. So we are trying to collect this metadata to see what is this happening. I think one of the interesting findings we got from there is these AIs are also good tools to help us understand what we are looking for. I mean, these surveys often are very huge, but then we realize that, okay, this question is similar to this. So this could be merged, or this could be asked in a different way, because suddenly if there is so much variance in the quality of answers, then the problem might be with the question. It might be perceived differently by different people. So then the language of these questions, the target of these questions need to be revisited. I think there is also learning. And then coming back to your first point, which I mean, I always dream about how this activism can be done to break it free. But the unfortunate paradigm is that, you know, we are kind of bounded with metrics. Our institutions are evaluating us with metrics all the times, higher education ranking, all the funders. So then how to really break free? And then if you just going back and just, it's a vicious cycle. I mean, who should start this momentum? Maybe we can have a discussion later on that, but I'm not very hopeful of like how this activism can be really practiced. So we get more into the quality, quality, not the quantity. And this, yeah.
Okay, so how could we use AI for research now? So you're saying that, you know, all the journals, they want to block the people, the authors, actually the authors were using, because of using AI, doing research or writing the papers. So now we have this tool, right? So we can't ignore it. How could we use it?
I mean, there's not a problem with using it. It's a matter of disclosure and for what purpose it's been used. So some journals are very eager with it, that, okay, for what purpose, for what section of the paper you use it, was it for proofreading? It's a lot about transparency, because, you know, the simple problem is that your intent as an author is not given. I mean, how one as a reviewer should really trust that, okay, you really have written it yourself. So then there's a lot of disclosure now that, okay, upfront, authors need to say that, okay, for what purpose, how. So I'm seeing that the direction is going more toward transparency. That more aspect of the research needs to come transparent, because we see the bad practices, and that actually damages the whole process. Because suddenly, if you are seeing those thousands of paper with all those instances, then how should we correct the system that we don't get this type of pollution into our discourse? So I think part of it really comes back to authors, that, you know, really using it, for example, responsibly, and there's a whole paradigm that how to use it responsibly. Then the other part comes with the evaluators, how to evaluate also responsibly and ethically. I mean, at the end, I think there is an area where we are learning how to augment these tools, and there's no like a silver bullet, like, you know, to do it this way or that way. It's more about always exercising the fact that, okay, to what extent I really want to outsource. Right? Personally, for me, writing has a certain joy. I like writing because then I can think. and I have a certain resistance not to really outsource it elsewhere, because then I will get some sort of an existential crisis. Okay, now you know what I'm gonna do. I mean, and then always there is an alteration. I'm very critical whenever I'm using AI. I mean, you get it, and okay, something comes out. Then the question is that, okay, am I comfortable with this outcome, or am I critical? Then I get questions, okay, if I'm critical, then I do it myself. For certain things I'm using, for example, coding. I used to learn Python in a very hard way, but they are very good and they're functional, because you know you want to get the job done, and I can read the code. If it's fine, if it's doing the same thing, then I'm fine with it. But when it comes to language, I mean, there are some words that I'm not even using it at all. So then, you know, it's not me anymore. So it's very personal. I mean, I don't have a recipe, but it's more like, um, yeah, and guidelines really doesn't reflect, because the main problem is that it's, first of all, it's really hard to detect if it's been used or not. Then it's a question of, okay, as a human, are you comfortable using it? To what extent? So sorry, my answer was not anywhere, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Couple of questions. So just a quick comment though. I would actually disagree in the fact that LLMs are quite good at programming. If you want to scale it, then you have some, you know, big issues. You see, for example, for just relatively short snippets, they work beautifully. But once you want to scale that code, then it's sort of the understanding of the architecture that it becomes problematic. Just a point of view. My question is, what do you think? What do you think the future of LLM overall in terms of we're talking about research though, but you know there are many main scholars, so say Jan LeCun, that has publicly have actually said, you know what, they have actually reached almost the limit, and the relatively new paper, you know, the illusion of thinking, and then it's and then a week later, the illusion of thinking by Anthropic. Do you think, for example, do you think that even though many big names are actually reaching out LLM research and they're trying to find out what the next big thing, the next breakthrough will be, do you believe we're still gonna companies will still push it, or will it just be some sort of as we've always done it, the first, you know, sort of the next one who comes up with the next breakthrough then will follow, or everyone's really or everyone really is on that train already?
Yeah, I mean, good question, and maybe I might have answer based on my perception of looking at things. Well, of course, there is a lot of area for integrating AI, because it eventually is becoming good in simplistic tasks. Like, you know, if you're looking at the whole agentic AI paradigm, so the room there for improvement is massive. So that augmentation of it just takes time, because companies also need to reorient and learn, and practices needs to come out. The concern I have, especially for academic research, is, you know, what we do in this business, you know, scientific discussion, scientific debate, uh, if get dominated by an entity like an LLM, and if you think that, you know, how LLM works, they are basically aggregating everything, and then they're just representing the most common answer. So, for example, I mean, if you ask your question and run it for 1,000 times, you see that the variety is very limited. It is just having very limited perspective and answering that question, okay, then suddenly it gets a plateau. So, and this is the problem. I mean, okay, LLMs have been trained on let's say, pure data for the first time, where the data was actually written by humans. And this is, let's say, 2021 backwards. But now, I mean, I talked about the pollution. Now we are having a lot of LLM generated content polluting the discourse. So the next generation LLMs will get trained on this polluted content. So in principle, the quality will degrade. I mean, yeah, exactly. Because imagine, like, if the all discourse of all innovative discussions are at the very end of the spectrum, meaning that, okay, that the tip of the bell-shaped curve is just obvious. And then the nuances, let's say emerging discussions are tails, those tails are getting more narrower because the whole cycle of LLM is just propagating on the very common discussions. And that's where we lose. That the nuances we will lose. It's just become so thin in the distribution. And that's become a problem because eventually if as a user, you're using LLM, you're not expecting something so novel out of it. It's just something very average. And I think this regress to the uniform is a problem. That everybody is just talking the same thing in a different way. So I think that is definitely a problem.
Just 1 second, we have a few minutes. We have Pietro, Michael, then I have last one if I can.
Well, mine was a bit more in the same space that Leila was saying. So if at VTT you have like a guideline to use it, because at the end, like you're also a center of research, so you also publish. So you have like a guideline. For example, you have Polytechnique. We are not allowed to use, I think, ChatGPT and DeepSeek in the chat as a chatbot. So I don't know if you have like a restriction of the VTT, you are allowing certain, and what is the discrimination?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that we are now putting effort to build our own stuff in our own infrastructure. So we are building these instances, for example, open source, that the data doesn't leave our premise. So this is an effort we are now doing, and I'm also leading that as well. So in a way, we are getting more aware that even with the agreements we are having with publishers and similar with, I think, you guys, you better to check what type of agreements you have with the Scopus. And I'm sure they are also restricting you that you're not allowed to take a paper from Scopus and dumping it to ChatGPT because that's non-compliance. And that creates risks for your institution yourself. And now this is more about the discussion that what are the infrastructure needs to be built to even deal with these type of instances. So I think now this awareness is just getting more created.
Just a follow-up on the bell curve comment. There's a new paper that just was released last week. I don't know if you saw it. It was about the cognitive debt that is occurring through the usage of LLM. So basically, they measured the recall of people, like using LLM to produce an essay, especially in learning environment, like for college students. And people were not able to remember after 40 seconds what they just wrote. And they actually measured with EGG, like brain scan, and they really noticed that there's like an actual neural collapse through the heavy usage of like a tool like ChatGPT. And and if it continues like that, for instance, like the idea of like experts that we can just like get 80% level of the expert right now, like in 2-3 years, maybe it will be like 95 or something, or even surpassed it. And now we'll have like no one, like no pilot in the plane, and we just like
pilot.
Yeah, which pilot?
Zombies.
So I think it raises questions about like how we make sure that we use these tools in such a way that it does not make us dumber, and also that allow us to maintain kind of a cognitive edge. Or
I mean, honestly, I have seen similar papers that using more of these tools cognitively degrade us. You get just comfortable with them and you lose capabilities. Like I have seen it with my coding skills. I used to know very good syntaxes by heart, but now I have outsourced it to an LLM, so I have not maintaining it anymore. Okay, maybe my brain has capacity to consume something else. I don't know, but the reality is that okay, to what extent this is okay, and we are allowing it. I think this is more like a self-awareness. That exactly as you said, it's an individual question. That because it only exists if you're using it. If you close it, it doesn't exist for you. It cannot harm you or benefit you. But then this trade-off it's very difficult because you can at the same time you see that you're benefiting, you're getting some productivity gain, you're faster, you're efficient, but then at the same time when you think about that, okay, if tomorrow this is gone for whatever reason, then what is the alternative? But I think the use is good because sometimes it's good to exercise. Okay, if this can do better than me, then maybe I should do something else. It's like this kind of a self-awareness thing that maybe I should develop certain skills that actually can combat these tools. I mean, I'm sure that all of you and I have this existential crisis when you start using and then you realize, okay, well, what I'm going to do in 3 years if I'm only writing papers.
Yeah.
Let's move to dinner. Thank you, Arash.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you for everyone online.
Thank you.